So this is the water filter we've made over the last couple of days. It's very simple. It's just 3 buckets, one of gravel, one of sand, one of charcoal, and then just a wooden frame just to hold it up. This is the water that went into it. That's the water that came out of it, if you want to have a look at that.
What? See the difference. Chai. Where's the cup? We have to drink that water right now.
So this, and the little floaty bits kind of blew in after, like, because the bucket was open. So the only tools as such that you need to actually make the filter itself is some screens. So we made these with various sized steel mesh I just got from hardware stores in town. There's like the finest one I could find. Let's have a look at those. A sort of coarser one, a really coarse one for the gravel, and a really fine one for getting rid of the powder. Basically any kind of frame which holds your mesh in that kind of shape will do the job. It doesn't need to be made well, it just needs to be something you can hold on to and just keeps the mesh tight-ish. And then these are all standard things, like these metal mesh sizes are very common in hardware stores, so you just get like a ½ a meter or something, cut out a square. Basically the entire process is just to get the things and then sort them by size using the screens. So the gravel is some gravel. So you want to get gravel, put it through the largest screen so that you end up with sort of like that as your largest size, and then probably put it through this screen to get rid of like the dust and the sand and all the non-gravelly bits. And that's pretty much the process for these as well. You want to use a screen large enough, or small enough that only the small bits get through, and then use a really small screen to get rid of the really small stuff. Because anything that's anything too big won't work, obviously. But anything that's too small will tend to glue the system closed. So like, with the sand and charcoal especially, we just got some sand just from down here, like just right there. We put it through this screen to get like fairly fine sand, to get rid of like the chunks. But then it was really important to put it through the cloth screen. Where's the That's gonna be interesting for the soundtrack. So
Daniel, do some dancing.
if you just put it through the fine screen, you get like this good coarse stuff, which is what you want. But you also get really fine sand, and that fine sand basically turns into cement when it gets wet, and so the water can't get through. Because basically, like, if you imagine that's a grain of sand, and you've got other grains of sand near it, there's enough space between them that water can get through. But if you've got really tiny little bits of sand, they fill up all of those spaces, and then the water can't get through. If you've got big chunks of, like, you know, almost like small rock, then the spaces are too big, and too much water gets through, it doesn't get filtered properly. So this is about the size of sand that you want, basically, like sort of quite coarse kind of sand. But if like, I don't have any of the fine stuff that I took out, but the fine stuff is like dust. And with that in it, the water just sort of didn't go through at all. And then it's basically exactly the same process with the charcoal, except you need to grind the charcoal first. So that mortar and pestle that we had was pretty much perfect for it. You could also use like a mechanical grinder, like a coffee grinder, or like what they use for the vegetables here. And that just looks like that. So the gravel and sand, I'm going about 3/4 full bucket, but that's fairly arbitrary. This I'll probably fill up a little bit more, so it's half full. But again, like, that's about the size that you want. So kind of a little bit even coarser than the sand. Like a little sort of like, almost like rice kind of size, or half rice. And so that's, yeah, charcoal. Just normal cooking charcoal. We just bought a bag of cooking charcoal, ground it up, and again, just filtered it with the, I think we used the like sort of coarse-ish mesh, and then I think you could use the cloth mesh, but for this, what I did was I just washed it through that metal mesh there. So just like put it in a bucket, mixed it with water, and then poured out the water over this. Kept what this mesh kept back, put that in the bucket, and then the black liquid basically with like the really fine charcoal, which is too fine, and again was gluing the whole system closed, just chucked it out. So you're left with that, like black rice basically, and that's about perfect. So that's it. You basically get rid of the gravel that's too big, get rid of the gravel that's too small, get rid of the sand that's too big, get rid of the sand that's too small, get rid of the charcoal that's too big, get rid of the charcoal that's too small, bam, that's it.
Perfect.
That's it. For the buckets, these buckets are these are 6,000 shillings each. I reckon I can haggle the guy down to 5,000.
Yeah.
And they're pretty much the entire expense of the system, because everything else is just dirt, charcoal, bits of scrap wood. You can also make the system out of anything that will hold this stuff. So like clay pots or something like they make here would work just as well. All it has to do is just hold the things, have a sort of a hole on the top and sort of a hole on the bottom. For these lids, I just got my knife and just like punched like 8 little slits in there, and then kind of like twisted the knife just to make them a bit bigger. That works fine. And then for the buckets, oh, that's not done. I did similar. I just can't even really see, but like again, just like punched some little holes, twisted the knife, 8. That's fine in the center, and then the water drains out of here. These lids are a perfect shape, and they got that little bowl there, so the water just sort of goes in there and then drains into the next bucket. And the only other thing was, it wasn't necessary in this, but on these two, I took a bit of this fabric, folded it over a couple of times, and then glued it with some super glue, but any glue would do, over those holes, so that the water doesn't wash out the charcoal and the sand. The wooden frame is just basic woodworking. It can be in this configuration, or it can be just like a table with a hole in it that you stack them on, like anything which basically keeps the buckets from falling over and keeps them high enough that you can put like a jerry can or a bucket underneath. And then just like some kind of like thread or rope or string or like these like straps just to tie it on nice and tight, so that if like, you know, a kid knocks into this or something, like it doesn't fall off. And just sit that in the center. These are air holes. Because as the water moves down, it kind of displaces the air, and the air needs to be able to escape. A couple of small holes in the side of the lid there, or somewhere on the outside here, like this one, just sort of keeps it so that the water can keep moving without doing weird things with the air pressure. And that's it. That's it. That's the entire process. You make the stuff, you put it in the buckets, you punch some holes, you make a frame, you get a water filter. Yep.
Dirty.
So this is the United Nations water. This is the water they give you to drink, which is, I mean, if you're not getting sick, I guess it's fine, but it's also not very clean. I'm going to, later today, I'm going to go and get some bore water, like from the ground pump, and put that through and see what that looks like. And then take some samples and get them tested in Arua somewhere.
All right.
Itself you can drink, because even we used to do this.
You know what? This water is much better than the one for DC Crystal. The recent one they brought the Nile. This water is totally different taste, but this is awesome. No
good.
taste of mild salt, no taste of what, so it's better. Like the other water of this Nile water, the bottled water.
These things do get better over time. There's a biofilm which needs to grow on the sand, and the charcoal needs to activate a little bit, which means the pores, like the nanopores, need to open up a bit. So this is just sort of first wash, kind of just getting the thing primed kind of time. This one that I had going last night with this water, it seems to be doing about 8 liters per hour. So, which is okay. I'm going to work on improving that, but that's already sort of like fast enough, I think. You only want to put about 3 of these jugs in here, otherwise you'll overfill the system. So 3 of these, blush, blush, blush. Come back an hour later and you'll have that, basically. This is also completely scalable. Like you can use larger buckets, you can use smaller buckets. The purpose of each of these things is to get progressively smaller. So the gravel takes out like the bits of stick and grass and like the large sort of clumps of stuff in the water. And then the sand has sort of like 2 effects. It's a very small filter. So again, like only things of a certain size can get through. And then also it has a biofilm which grows on it, which is kind of like a sort of microbial kind of jelly, which then digests microbes like bacteria and viruses, like it'll actually eat them. And then the charcoal is basically like, even though like the grain of charcoal might be the size of like, you know, like a piece of rice, it's microstructure. Like if you looked at that like on the atomic level, it's got a massive surface area, basically. Like the holes in the surface of the grain are pretty much the perfect size so that water will just pass it by, but everything else will get like stuck in the holes. So all of your microbes, your bacteria, your viruses, your little bits and pieces, which are like small enough that they get through the sand, won't get through the carbon. It's just like, and then it keeps it there. That takes out the large stuff, that takes out the medium stuff, that takes out the small stuff, and what comes out at the end should be just water. It will be necessary at some point to clean this filter out because the stuff that gets taken out of the water stays in the bucket. I'm thinking probably about once a year. If you just sort of take out the buckets one by one, empty them into a basin, give them a bit of a wash, throw out the water, and then chuck the stuff back in the bucket. And then it's good to go for another year, maybe 6 months, that sort of thing. Like when you get like commercial filters made in like factories and that sort of stuff, given by an NGO, it's got to be basically the same technology, except you know, in a nice plastic housing with a logo on the side. But this will be more effective because it's bigger and free.